Buenos días.
Good afternoon to you all, and welcome to this last part of the closing lecture of the doctoral seminar on the European projects modernization and governance in a plural framework with shared values and goals, which we organize within the mobility grants of the Charles V Award granted to Don Marcelino Oreja, who has been with us throughout the seminar, whom we are grateful for participating so actively in the debates. When organizing this seminar, he didn't hesitate to propose a person who has played a key role in the process of integrating Spain in the European communities then and now EU, and he proposed Ambassador Raimundo Bassols Jacas, whom I'm not authorized to introduce, particularly having around Don Marcelino Oreja, who has worked closely with him and who is his friend. Thank you for making the introduction, and you have the floor, Don Marcelino. Mayor, Director, dear friends, what I have to say is that to me it has been a great pleasure to be here. I have felt, of course, I've tried to learn a lot. All the presentations have been brilliant, and I feel real emotion of how prepared and how much the young people know. I have taken a lot of notes, and I have tried to learn as much as I have been able to. If the director continues to invite me, I will come in future editions. I have a great honor and pleasure to say a few words. Under 5 minutes, I could speak for hours about Raimundo Bassols. He has been my teacher for many years. It's quite difficult to find anyone like him who has the experience, the knowledge. He had brilliant university studies with all the prizes you could get and all the awards. Then he went to Bologna, and he got the the honoris causa doctorate by Bologna. From the academic point of view, he has all the all the merits, and from a professional point of view, I remember many things about him. When does Spain start the attempts to approach the EU? Since '62, when Castilla sends the first letter, then a second letter in '65, but particularly beginning '70, when the agreement is signed, is when Raimundo Bassols starts participating, and since then he was always there. And we arrive at the year '76, '77, and in '77, when I was in the government, I received a letter from the Director General, Raimundo Bassols, addressed to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who doesn't know who's going to be the next one. I continued because we won the elections, but at that time it wasn't known. And he said what we should have to do, which means how professional he was. He wasn't seeing who was going to win the elections or not. He had the obligation, the duty of saying what it had to be done, and he did it with a great competence. I passed the letter to the President of the Government, and after winning the elections, the first thing we did, the President of the Government had an interview with Santiago Carrillo and with Felipe González, then with the nationalist parties, to see how we could give that important step. But the lyrics of that piece of music was written by Raimundo Bassols. Then the formal presentation of the opening of negotiations in the year '77, we did two things at the same time. That, and at the same time to initiate negotiations with the Council of Europe, which was quicker, it was immediate. It had difficulties because the country needed to have a constitution in order to join the Council of Europe. We didn't have the constitution. We amended it in a way, or thanks to King Juan Carlos' action with the President of Austria, who was very close friend with the President of the Secretary General of the Council of Europe. So with the European institutions, we knew exactly what we had to do because we had all the plan prepared by Raimundo Bassols. So I am so glad to have him here. He has come only a moment ago and he's going to leave very quickly. I will go back with him to Madrid, but I want you to know, he's very well known that he still has very brilliant ideas, and I continue to be his pupil. Many thanks. Your Excellencies, the authorities, distinguished sir, I don't know if I can say Your Excellency and at the same time friend. I don't know whether that is in protocol. Dear authorities, dear friends, and dear professors. I hope microphones are not against me. Why am I here? First, to thank that you have thought of me from the organizers of this excellent foundation. And what do I intend? I intend to make a reflection, particularly for the students coming from other countries and from this country, in three parts: the dream of Europe, the reality of Europe, and parts of the problems of Europe. I think it is a moment for a limited reflection because time is of the essence. Europe was dreamed for centuries. Europe did not exist. It was a dream of writers, politicians, philosophers, the military people or thinkers, etc. I wish to pay tribute to some names in history that dreamed before Europe was built. They dreamed of Europe. I remember the Duke of Sully, William Penn, l'Abbé Saint-Pierre, philosophers such as Rousseau, Montesquieu, and Kant, and Saint-Simon, writers such as Victor Hugo, Ernest Renan, politicians such as Giuseppe Mazzini, or the Count Coudenhove Kalergi, or Briand, or Winston Churchill, Salvador de Madariaga, Jean Monnet. They all dreamed of a united Europe. It was a job of that lasted for centuries, since the death of Charles the Great, Charlemagne. Allow me to refer to some of these dreams, 3 or 4 of these dreams. In the 18th century, in his famous and strong project of perpetual peace, the Abbot Saint-Pierre said in a strong dream, the 24 European sovereigns will be represented by their deputies in a Senate located in a free city, each one with a vote. None of them will take the arms unless against who has been declared the enemy of the European society. What a strong, forceful dream, talking of peace. A few years, century later, in the Congress of Peace of Paris, which he presided over, Victor Hugo said, "One day will come where there will be two immense groupings, the United States of America and the United States of Europe, located one opposite to the other, and they will shake hands over the sea, and in the 20th century there will be an extraordinary nation which will be called Europe in the 20th century, and the following centuries, and transfigured, it will be called humankind." 99 years later, Salvador de Madariaga, in that Congress of the European Movement of 1948, he said, "We had a poetic dream, which I love to recall." He said, Madariaga said, "Europe will be born when Spaniards will say our Chartres, when the Britons will say our Poland, when the Italians would say our Copenhagen, when the Germans will say our Bruges. Then it will be when the spirit that will drive history and leads history will say two words only: Fiat Europa. Let Europe be done." And politicians didn't escape their dreams. Politicians that are not dreamers, those escaped. Aristide Briand, in the League of Nations Assembly in 1929, he said, "I think that among the peoples that are geographically grouped like those of Europe, there should be a sort of federal bond." And Winston Churchill, in his famous speech in Zurich in 1946, he said, "We have to establish a sort of United States of Europe," a realistic dream. I go back to Madariaga again, Fiat Europa. And I turn from dreams into reality. And when was Europe made? Europe was made in a moment, in a place, at one time, very specific ones. That morning of the 9th of May of 1950, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of France, the Quai d'Orsay, had convened a number of journalists, 200, even foreign correspondents. It was an interview with the minister, a statement of the minister, Robert Schuman, at 6 p.m. in the Salon de l'Horloge. And at that time, the journalists were there without knowing what they were going to listen to. I'm not going to offend you with reading you the declaration, of course, not even in a summary version. What I want to say is that the reality imposed at 6 p.m. in the Quai d'Orsay, when Robert Schuman said that the European Union, that was going to become a great European community, was subject to some words: supranationality, common market, even if it was small, at the beginning only steel and coal, to the opening of this common market to all the peoples of Europe that desired and had a democracy, economic orientation of the unity of Europe, a final of the path that would end up in a federation, and above all, to peace and peace. He said, and I wish to read this: "Any war between France and Germany becomes not merely unthinkable, materially impossible," and that's the way it was. In this brief comment of what I have said, That historic morning was can be identified as with the beginning of the creation of Europe. I can imagine myself in the Salon de l'Horloge. Jean Monnet was at the right of the declaration. I mean, in fact, Jean Monnet was the one that had drafted the declaration. And Jean Monnet comments in his memoirs, Minister Schuman, when he finished his statement, his declaration, he didn't want to talk too much to journalists. There were some specific questions, but he didn't want to reply to specific questions. He had been 2 days ago consulting with the German government. That night he was going to travel to the United Kingdom and to consult with them. But one journalist stood up and asked, "This what you have read?" He asked. Is it a leap to the unknown? And Monet says, the minister took a few seconds, which were an eternity, and he answered finally, yes, it is a leap to the unknown. Dear friends, we are in the unknown. We are in the road to Europe. And since this is a meeting of young Europeanists, very well prepared, I wish to talk to you not about dreams, not about the reality. I will be brief. I want to talk about the problems, 5 of the problems faced by Europe. I wish to recall them so that you can reflect on them, that you may have a moment of calm and think of the difficulties, because difficulties, in the end of the day, the problems show that the road is not easy, and legitimate us these obstacles and these hesitations that we encounter in the road to Europe. First problem, how was Europe built? Is it built deepening it or enlarging it with other countries? And this problem starts from day one. There is part of the doctrine that says, first, let us build Europe, the 6 founding members, and then let us invite the rest to join. There is part of the doctrine that says, no, first let us enlarge. Let us, all those that need to join, and then all together, let us deepen. The first position was led by one of the best presidents of the Commission, Jacques Delors, and I thought it was true, or that he was right. The second part, they say the policy should not be this one. At that moment, and you will see how people change, at that moment I thought that 15, 20 or 30 members could not be included in the scaffolding of the building of Europe, but the same as the scaffolding of the building of the Tower of Babel fell because of the confusion of languages. As Delors, I thought, let us deepen, but then later on, and due to pure fate, I changed of opinion. I was part and parcel of the negotiation group of the government of Spain, and that made me change. First, Spain was coming out of the regime of the General Franco and started in the dream, marvelous dream of reaching democracy. We wanted democracy. It was a democracy of a country, a young country, although an old nation, and it was a democracy that we needed to anchor in the rock of Europe. We needed that this democracy was covered by Europe. What happened to us? that we started negotiations in 1979, and the 23rd of February of 1981, we had the great accident of a failed coup d'etat triggered by the military, some military, and then our delegation changed its views. We needed Europe, and two presidents of member states of Europe were delaying our negotiations, which lasted for 6 years. They spoke a language of technicalities that was not understood by Spain. They said, yes, agriculture, competition, the problems this is going to cause us electorally with Spain is difficult, we will see. The first enlargement with the joining of the UK, Denmark and Ireland is not finished. Let us finish it before starting the second enlargement. Greece, Portugal and Spain. These were delays that were unbearable for a country that needed badly a democracy and that had a coup d'etat that was dangerous for its stability. That was the moment to think, no, we shouldn't start by deepening and then enlarging. Let us start by enlarging. For political reasons, we cannot delay more. And frequently I say that if we had here around political representatives or diplomatic representatives from Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, Slovenia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, these countries will think exactly as I do. They would say it is natural first to deepen and then to enlarge. But for us, the Berlin Wall fell and we were orphans politically. We needed an option and we could not wait until Europe was built to decide to join Western democracy as it is, the one that prevails in the United Europe. Second problem, which I want to mention here, to reflect with you. How many times we say that we don't have a Europe of defense? What happens with that? That it is urgent to have an army, a European army, and weapons industry of a Europe, totally European. Everybody forgets that we had a defense Europe. When the Schuman Declaration was successful, when the coal and steel community was established in 1951, the President of France, René Pleven, who had been Minister of Defense months earlier, he convened a meeting to say that we needed a Europe of defense. We're talking of 1952, when in 1950 the Declaration of Schuman had taken place, and 1951 was the coal and steel community. He was right, even if it looked too precipitated. And a meeting was created to approve the Europe of Defense. And it was approved as well, a treatment of 27 of May 1952, where a European army with 40 divisions, 14 were from France, 12 from Germany, 11 from Italy, and 3 from the Benelux, was created. There was a Europe of Defense, and this agreement was together with an important project of the political Europe, the one that had to organize that defense, that was approved, and that was approved in 52. We already had the defense of Europe, which we are missing now. What about memory we have? because at that point there was a fact, one of the typical problems of Europe. The Treaty of 27 of May 1952 was ratified. France had to ratify the 31st of August in 1954. France was involved at that time in the peace with Indochina in Geneva, and they had to justify a great or a good agreement, actually, of its withdrawal from Southeast Asia, and France was committed in both negotiations. In the end, the National Assembly of France in August of 1954 postponed ratification, which meant the non-ratification by France of the European Community of Defense. Why? There are two versions. The first one is that France could not, because they couldn't give up so much sovereignty. General de Gaulle used to say, I cannot conceive a European army with French divisions under the command of a general from Germany. So the cession of this sovereignty hadn't reached or hadn't gone so far. But there are other versions. Sadia Tuval and Jeffrey Robin have a book, Multilateral Negotiation, an analytical approach, where they say, no, France had to respect a Russian veto. So as not to ratify the Community of Defense, because it had received help from Russia to sign a fair agreement on Indochina. So it failed, this Community of Defense, and the political community of Europe that was going to be created after the other one. So this was a great delay. What a great problem. We still don't have a European Community of Defense. Third problem, the non-NATO European Constitution. We don't have a constitution. And we don't have a constitution notwithstanding the fact that in the Intergovernmental Conference in Nice in 2000, it was adopted a declaration on the future of Europe. And the next year, in the European Council of Laeken, a convention was convened to study the specialties of the future of Europe. And however, we continued with the treaty, or the constitutional treaty, that we call it constitution, because it was called constitutional treaty, and we always speak of this episode of as the constitution, the European Constitution, because the treaty had a number of ideological statements that made it a constitution. For instance, Europe is a Christian unity. So, in any case, the constitutional treaty was passed on the 29th of October of 2004. It went through the European Parliament in 2005, and it adopted, and the European Parliament recommended member states to us, member states, because at that time we were already inside Europe in 1985, although it only entered into force the 1st of January of 1986. We were there since then, but it recommended us, member states, to ratify the constitutional treaty. France and the Netherlands resorted to direct democracy whether the treaty had to be ratified or not, this constitutional treaty. The referendum in France failed. Only 45% said yes, but 54 were against, with and in the case of the Netherlands, the favorable group was 38%, whereas the votes against were 61.6%. And in 2006, the dream of the constitution was broken. The third problem, among the many that Europe has gone through, but I have brought this few to this table for reflection. Fourth problem, the Brexit. I feel that the United Kingdom always felt uncomfortable in Europe. This is my feeling, which I wish to share with the young people. I know some of you are from the UK. Of course, I respect fully you and the United Kingdom and its decisions. Why the United Kingdom did not feel comfortable in Europe and in the building of Europe? The UK did not approve clearly the declaration of Robert Schuman. It didn't appear the 18th of April of 1951 to access the steel and coal community. The United Kingdom was not present at the Community of Defense. It didn't appear. It didn't appear in the Treaty of Rome in March '57. And however, it is curiously enough, the United Kingdom at the end of the 50s led and made possible the establishment in 1960 in particular of the European Free Trade Association, which you know like EFTA, the European Free Trade Area. It was not a common market, it was a free trade area without giving up sovereignties. And this situation meant that relationships were broken with the European Union. Surprisingly, in 1961, the United Kingdom requests joining Europe. And among all the accessions agreements to Europe, that was the most difficult and the longest. If ours, which was the most difficult and the second longest, lasted almost 7 years, the one of the United Kingdom, they requested entry in 1961. In '72, they signed the agreement, which entered into force the 1st of January of 1973. This agreement had two vetoes in 1963 and 1967 by General de Gaulle, who understood that the United Kingdom was a Trojan horse of the US to try and delay the building of Europe. And when finally the United Kingdom joined, its attitude was not very clear on a political and economic unity of Europe. On the contrary, in the Maastricht Treaty, they didn't give up to accept the European and Monetary Union. They created a sort of Europe with different speed. Finally, in 2016, they decided to leave the European Union. painful decision. The European Union had very little experience on this. Only in the course of the years between 1951 and 2016, only Greenland had left the European Union, which was not an independent country, but rather a territory annexed to Denmark, and it was quite calm. There were some negotiations between Denmark as representing Greenland and the rest of the member states, and an acceptable agreement was reached. Greenland wanted to leave Europe for technical reasons in the fishing sector. There was not a big problem. But in the Lisbon Treaty, there was the famous Article 50 about withdrawal of members of the European Union. And the UK seized that opportunity. For 2 years, an agreement for withdrawal was negotiated, which unfortunately has not been ratified, because for 3 times the British Parliament has rejected the agreement by which the withdrawal of Britain was regulated. What is going to happen is impossible for me to tell. I cannot tell you, I don't know. But this was a terrible disappointment for Europe. In the United Kingdom, there is a great difficulty. What happened is that the Prime Minister May has resigned, and the problem has to be confronted once again. We don't know in which direction. Either a withdrawal with an agreement, which may be a chaos. The procedural law and criminal law has been dealt with, but that is only one of the problems. A new referendum, who knows? I mean that among the group of problems, Brexit is a great preoccupation for all the countries. And I finish with the problems. And I'm approaching the end of my lecture. The Europe of variable geometry. Is it good or is it not good? I remember when I arrived as an ambassador to the European communities in Brussels, the 7th of January of 1976, the Leo Tindemans' report appeared. He was a great pro-Europeanist and a man who knew a lot of things. He had been the Prime Minister in Belgium a few months before, and the Council asked him for a report on the future of Europe. And Tindemans, in the variable velocities or variable speeds option, took upon what Willy Brandt said, a differentiated Europe, the former German Chancellor, or of different speeds. The words of Tindemans were these: there are states that have the means to advance and that have the duty to be at the head, and states that have reasons that the Council, at the proposal of the Commission, may recognize as valid in order not to make progress, and that will receive from the other states all the necessary assistance and help so that they reach the possibility of meeting the others. I think these words are still valid today. We are in a difficult situation to reach the political union or the economic union of Europe. Many enemies, many more than the ones that were then, are now, and this is a reason for reflection. Do all the vessels of a navy have to reach the port at the same time on the same day? They may have different speeds and Some may arrive a little earlier or a little later in the port without any problem or any damage for the Navy. You, young students, think and reflect. Times have changed. The Lisbon Treaty admits reinforced cooperation. It is good to keep this in mind. I sometimes think, and this is something I wish to convey to you, because you are the ones who are going to decide in the future. Is it worthwhile not making Europe, or is it worthwhile to make Europe at different speeds with reinforced cooperation with some countries which are more daring, I hope among them Spain, to join the first group, to go towards unity, both in the economic and the political spheres, waiting for the others to follow? This is a reproduction of the first problem that I mentioned in this brief meeting. Perhaps what it is better is that the unity of Europe is achieved, even if it is done with 5, 6, or 7 countries, and the rest will follow. And I finish. As way of conclusion on dreams, realities, and some of the problems that I have taken at random, I ask myself, and I will answer you, you will not answer because this is not a debate, but I leave the question there, and that is what I have come here for, to reflect in front of you. If European politicians of today, do they have the same muscle, the leadership, the political will, I repeat, political will, and the convictions of pro-Europeanist positions that in the past were shown by Adenauer, De Gasperi, Spaak, Schuman, or Monet? This is a question. Keep it for you. Secondly, I would like you to think of the strength that the ideological teams of the Eurosceptics have, the strength of extreme nationalists and the populists that seem not to wish the Europe that we dream, that is ongoing, although it hasn't reached the target yet. I am alarmed by the splendid book written by a Danish professor, Marlene Wind, which is entitled The Tribalization of Europe, where she asks herself, after taking a look at Europe, the Brexit, Catalonia, Scotland, are we going back to the tribal state? After all this effort that we have made, are we going back to the small tribes Europe? This is a question for you. If you haven't read it, read it. It's just another reflection. And last comment. About 3 days ago, the ambassador of France in the UN, François Delattre, a man with a great experience in the UN, where he has been for 18 years, and now he has gone back to Paris for a high post in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, has published an article just 3 days ago in the American press where he says,
is that Europe has both the historical responsibility and the means to become one of the major centers of action and influence in multipolar world.
We're going towards a multipolar world, says Delattre, which will be made up of big powers, China, the United States, Russia, maybe by India, and we will have gone back to the tribes in our small countries, Or are we capable of confronting the future together and being Europe? And these reflections are the ones that I leave here with you. The leaders of today, do they have the political will? The anti-European forces, do they have enough strength to lead us to tribalization? We, in the future of the multipolar world that is expecting us, are we capable of establish ourselves as Europe and to have strength, voice, and a political presence? This is left to you in this closing of this course. The future is in your hands, the young people. My generation is over. My generation did what they could with the problems, with the illusions, with the visions, dreams, and with realities. I personally will continue believing in a united Europe until the end of my path. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, distinguished ambassador. Thank you for this master class that you have imparted here. I can say on behalf of all of us and on behalf of the foundation, it is a great honor and privilege to listen to you. And it is a lesson that I hope we get to convey, not just those who have listened to us here, but those who will be able to listen thanks to our media, the internet. We will be able to disseminate through them this life experience, heartfelt opinion that shows that with illusion and with work we can build a better world. Thank you for sharing this experience with us.